Next speaker, Dario Alborghetti, likes food. He loves food. But he thinks we haven't got it right, or at least businesses haven't got it right. So he's built a career starting his own food companies, and his latest, based in Berlin, makes personalized food supplements. Here to tell us how in future we'll be thinking with our stomachs, please welcome Dario.
I was grown up in an Italian family, where my mom always told me about to not play with my food. And what I loved to do when I was a kid was breaking the rules. And it turns out that a couple of decades later, that's exactly what I started doing, play my own food. But this time for a good purpose. When I started looking into the industry, this is what I saw. I saw a lot of junk food products. I saw a tremendous amount of food wasted, with animals being exploited and also land being exploited. So this made me try to think, what do I believe if I step into the industry for changing something? What do I believe the future of food has to be, in my opinion? And I quickly came to the conclusion that for me, food in the future has to be a sustainably produced source of health. That's why, because in 2050, actually, we're going to be 9.7 billion people on this planet. And the problem won't be how will we be able to produce enough food to fill them all, but how we'll be able to produce enough food sustainably to feed them all. As a background information, the food industry started, as we know it today, after the Second World War, where we had a tremendous growth in population. So we had to find new ways and engineer new products that were able to feed the whole population. And the food industry made a tremendous job in being able to sustain this growth. Unfortunately, they have been optimizing and engineering food products for their own interest. And what I mean with that is optimizing for margins. If you take, for example, the traditional Big Mac, which you pay, I don't know, like $4, but de facto costs 76 cents. Once, just to give an example, I was talking to a producer for protein bars, and when I asked them, okay, like, can you develop, please, a protein bar for me? The first two questions that I got asked was, what is the suggested retail price would you like to have, and what are the margins that you would like to have? These are the two parameters for the development of it. Another example is I was talking to a big food corporate for developing herbal supplements. And I was asking them, what is the most effective dose of a certain herb in the given supplement to have the best effect for the customer? And this is actually what I got replied. So from pricing perspective, I would not recommend to use such a high content of extract, as this will raise cost heavily. As you cannot claim any benefits on our extract, a slight amount is already enough to name it on the label. And this is really how it works. On the other side, what I've been doing and mastering is how can we, as a food corporate, create products that makes you crave it more and more and more. And there's not really a black magic behind that. All they've been doing is to create food products that combines ingredients like sugar, salt, and trans fats that act on your brain the same way as heavy drugs like cocaine and so on works. So if you take sugars, for example, it stimulates the secretion of dopamine, the hormone, the same way as cocaine does. And speaking of sugar, as of today, we're consuming 5 times as much the recommended daily average. And this is because, as you can see, the food industry has been putting it in almost all the products that we consume so that we want more and we come back and buy that. And obviously, this doesn't come for free. This has huge repercussion on consumers' health. 10% of the US population suffer of diabetes. We have about 600 million people worldwide that are obese, and 70.3 million people die every year of heart attack. And this is just because of the nutrition that we have as of today. Problems are not just on the human body, but also on the environment. 70% of fresh water is consumed globally, is consumed for agriculture. Because of the way we farm animals, we have reached the highest rate of nitrogen oxide, which is an extremely polluting substance, for the past 800,000 years. 2.5 billion kilos of pesticides are dumped on the ground every year for farming to produce the wheat. So how is the industry changing? How can it evolve in a way that can produce healthier product in a more sustainable way? Personalized nutrition is probably one of the most groundbreaking of the discoveries right now in food. Essentially, by analyzing our genome together with our gut flora, we are able to understand what exactly our body needs. Turns out actually that our cells can live easily up to 120 years if they are fed with the right nutrients. And in our gut flora, we have 10 times more bacteria than cells, which constitute 60 to 80% of the immune system. So right now, applying technology like artificial intelligence and also cheaper sequencing of DNA and microbiome, we will be able to understand exactly in the future what our individual body needs. There's a company in US that started to do that, and we are just at the very, very beginning of this. Do you know how much food is wasted every year? 1/3 of the food that we produce is wasted. Just to put it into a context, if you take this food and you put it into standard containers, these containers will cover 60% of the surface of London. So this is definitely not how we are supposed to approach our food system in the future. There's a lot of business model, both from a B2B perspective, but also from a consumer perspective. In fact, if you take, for example, this brand, what they do is they take the so-called ugly produce, which is vegetables and fruits that are too ugly to be sold in traditional retail chains, and they process it to do like fresh juices. This way, they just get rid of food which is good, but otherwise would have been wasted. As I mentioned before, in 2050 will be 9.7 billion people. So we will have to find ways on how to produce ingredients traditionally sourced from animals in an alternative way. If you see here, for producing, we need way more water for producing proteins from a cow than from a cricket. We see more and more companies now starting to talk about eating insects as a future of proteins. This won't be the only future of proteins. For example, there's this company who's able to replicate a burger in terms of taste and texture by just combining different parts of plants. And it bleeds exactly like a burger. It's actually quite tasty. If you're in the US, try it. It's awesome. Same concept of sustainability. Imagine milk, for example. Imagine having a glass of milk, then exactly the same as cow milk, with the only exception that has never seen a cow. This is a relatively new technology where essentially you can produce especially animal-based products, like, for example, milk, without using and exploiting the animals. So the way it works is milk, it has all these characteristics, especially because of a certain protein called casein. And what you can do, you can extract the genes of casein, implant it into bacteria, make the bacteria grow like fermentation. It's a little bit like brewing beer. And after you have your tank full of bacteria containing casein, you can extract the casein and reproduce the milk the same way chemically as cow milk but with the only exception that no cows were exploited. This is what this company, Perfect Day, is doing now in San Francisco. 1/3 of the nutrients in our produce is wasted. It disappears 7 days after harvest. And how our food system is today, the produce before reaching our plates, it takes almost a week. It has to travel thousands of kilometers. And as I mentioned before, 70% of fresh water has been used for cultivating them. What we can do, though, and what we're discovering is new technologies where essentially we can grow produce indoor by artificial lights using 20 times less water. And because the environment is a controlled environment, we don't need to use pesticides anymore. And what you can do is you can build a restaurant, like this restaurant in Berlin, where I'm from, where essentially they cultivate the produce inside the retail point, and the so-called from farm to table is about 20 seconds. So how will, considering all these changes, day in the future from a food perspective will look like? Probably we will wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning, we will go to the bathroom, and our microbiome will be sampled. It will be uploaded on our health kit, and by the time we go to the kitchen for preparing breakfast, we're gonna open the fridge, which contains all the exact ingredients that our body needs, that will be automatically ordered online. We won't be able to drink our milk, because when we take the carton, we actually see that the smart packaging analyzed the content of it and told us that it's expired. And by the time that we go to the office, we probably will be drinking a coffee that has been genetically modified, the beans, so that we not only get away, but it also lowers our stress level. We're gonna have lunch in a restaurant that the produce was picked 20 seconds before we actually eat it, and by the time that we go home, food will be delivered at our place with the exact amount of calories that we have burned during the day because we tracked it with our device. And when going to sleep, we'll be compensating the micronutrients that we didn't get in our body with our personalized supplements, for example. So are we far away from this? This is really how the industry is changing. And so probably now it's time to think how we as consumer will. Maybe next time we go to the supermarket. Thank you.
I'm hungry. Thank you very much indeed for that, Dario. Now, you set out the need at the beginning of that, almost 10 billion people on the planet in just a few decades' time, which is quite a bracing thought. What's stopping the ideas that you set out sort of taking hold? Is it the farming lobby, which, as we know, is very powerful?
It's when you play with food, you have to consider aspect of scale. And the aspect of scale is not irrelevant in the sense that there's one duty that big food corporate have. So it's easy to point the fingers, but the fact that they have one duty, which is food safety. So food can actually kill. So we have to put in place technologies that enable also a rollout of new, healthier products, but produced in a safe way.
Okay, and how are you going to persuade me that a cricket or a cockroach protein burger is going to be absolutely delicious?
I'm quite sure that if I mill it and I give you a bar...
And you don't tell me.
And I don't tell you, you're going to like it.
Okay.
They fooled me like that.
There's an example in the past of where foods have been introduced as well, haven't they, that we were unfamiliar with. How do people deal with it?
It's fine. If you take, for example, the sushi, originally in Western culture, we were not really used to eat raw fish. So what we created, it was the California roll that is out of vegetables inside, just to start to get acquainted to the concept of sushi. And then they introduced the raw fish.
So it's all about psychology and
Yeah.
attitudes. But it's not just the yucky factor as well, because a lot of what the future that you described there, I think a lot of people are resistant to the ideas, for example, of genetically modified organisms. Have we got to overcome that?
If you take genetically modified, it has a bad connotation for how it's been used in the past. So in the past, GMO products were GMO because so food corporates could have more money, and that turned out that actually was against the health of the people, right? But if you use GMO for example, producing synthetic milk, or for reducing, having a specific function like stress reduction in a coffee bean, this is, I think, the next frontier. Probably we could not call it GMO anymore because there's a bad connotation, but another term. But de facto will be like that.
Well, I'm sure the hipsters of Shoreditch will come up with a better name for that sort of coffee. But thank you very much indeed, Dario. Thank you for your time. Thank you. It's like that. Thank you.